agenda. The OSSD board is joining us, and that's under 8.2 right now. We're going to put it up to 6.1, and we're going to have that conversation.
8.1 is going to move up right after that.
And 8.1 will be right after. So we're going to have a 6.1 and a 6.2. And then, so we'll get going. Need to change. Do we have any public comment as of right now? Okay. I just did the adjustments to the agenda. I need a motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, August 5th.
So moved.
All right, so moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, the minutes are approved. Board correspondence. Well, the OSSD board is here. They corresponded and asked to attend our meeting, so we'll have that conversation soon. Anything else that you can think of? Correspondence?
Not that I've seen.
Okay.
Still assisting.
Yeah. All right. And is there any other comments out here? Any other public comments?
Listed 3 times for tonight for some reason.
I know, I'm like,
We're doing a lot of public.
nobody will comment anything, but we've got lots of opportunity. All right, so, welcome, you guys, OSSD board.
Maybe you could do just quick introductions.
Yeah, we can go around. Do you want to start, Michael?
Oh, sure. My name is Michael Livingston. I'm a Sharon resident and on the Sharon board, and have been an educator in the Upper Valley until a couple of years ago for about 45 years. So thanks for coming and joining us. Be part of the conversation.
Hi, good evening. I'm Bill Edgerton. I'm with the Rochester Stockbridge District School Board, and we're doing great things, and we're enjoying every minute of it. And we're not afraid to tackle challenges and overcome those challenges. And right now, we're all trying to do the right thing. So it's very interesting times. We're lucky to be here. Thank you.
I'm Jamie Daniel. I'm elected to the school board last March, right into the fire immediately when everything started changing. I'm living in Bethel now for almost 5 years.
Hi, Dave Dumais. I'm from Royalton, and a similar timeline. Been on the school board since March. Thanks for coming.
Eric Lopez from Stratford. I think I've been on the school board for about 4 years. I lose track of time, apparently. And I have nothing nice to say like Bill does.
Kathy Galuzzo, I've been on the school board for like 18 years, so I've been through lots of changes. Act 46, my favorite thing in the world to survive. And going through the challenges that we're going through now. I'm glad you guys could join us to talk about it. Dustin?
Yeah, I'm Dustin Ray. I'm on the Stratford School Board, School District. I live in South Stratford. You can probably tell by my accent. And yeah, I think, I've been, this is going on my 3rd year. So yeah, and enjoy my team. Yep.
Stacy?
Hi, I can't see you all, but I'm very pleased to talk to you. I'm Stacey Peters. I live in Hancock. I'm chair of the Granville Hancock Unified District. That's in New England, which you could probably tell from my accent.
And is that Robin? And Robin?
I'm Robin B. Belong. I am part of the Rochester Stockbridge Supervisory Union. I'm on the board there. I'm a former educator also. I actually started in Tunbridge and then went down to Cavendish for several years.
And Sana?
I'm Sana Siddiqui. I was also out of the frying pan into the fire and joined the board for the first time in April. And you can tell from my accent that I'm from Old England, now in New England.
Nancy?
Hi, I'm Nancy Pejui. I'm chair of the White River Unified District, and I live in Bethel. And at the moment, I'm in East Barnard babysitting but I am going to be relieved very shortly. So I'm going to come offline for a little bit and get dropped off in South Royalton with the hopes that Jamie or somebody will decide to give me a ride back home.
I can do that, Nancy.
I can do it.
All right, and
Oh, that Jamie, yeah.
Chris is,
We do that all the time. Yes, Jamie's got you, Nancy.
I got you, Nan.
The other Jamie.
so it's not, I can't see, he's in the bottom corner.
Will.
That's not.
Will.
And
Oh, no,
Melissa-
oh, no.
Melissa, yeah.
Okay, so Will, go ahead and I'll get you now.
Yeah, hi, I'm Will. I'm actually in the car. Will Davis with the Sharon board, shuttling a kid home, so I'll be online here in a minute.
And Nell?
Nell Donaldson in my second year on the Stratford board.
And Sylvia?
Sylvia Moore, my fourth year on the Sharon board.
All right, and do you guys want to introduce yourself?
I think Ann just needs to call a quick, she's gonna call her special meeting to order.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a quorum, including Ryan Anderson, who's up on the board there. So we'll call to order at 6:12. And do we have any public comments from Lauren or Lindsay?
Looks like no.
Seeing none, we'll proceed with introductions. Oh, you're gonna keep down.
Yep.
Do you need to have this recorded, right?
I'm gonna take it from work.
Okay. So I am Ann Kaplan. I have been on the Randolph board through the unification of our district from a supervisory union district into a unified supervisory district. So, so maybe, I don't know, 18 years maybe. And I'm currently the chair.
And I'm Martha Hafner. I'm from Randolph Center. I have taught in all of your schools at some point. But I'm currently on the board I'm a March newcomer too, so.
Hi, I'm Beverly Lochner. I'm the newest member of the board. I was appointed in August. And I am living rent. Emil Parmalee, I've been on the board for about a year and a half. Randolph Center.
I'm sorry, I missed your first name?
Emil.
Emil, thank you.
And then Ryan Anderson.
Good evening. I'm Ryan Anderson from Brookfield.
Okay.
There you go.
Here we are.
How would you like to start? What do you have questions for us?
Well, we're just curious kind of what you're thinking about in terms of trying to be a little bit proactive about what's happening with each 454 in terms of waiting for the state to tell us what to do versus sort of reaching out and sort of discussing how you might see being a little bit more proactive. So
Well, I would say from being on the board this long that we're not a wait and see what happens kind of crew. When we merged supervisory unions, we were very proactive and we welcomed our partners and worked together to merge those two supervisory unions. And then when Act 46 came along, we worked really hard together to come up with how that would look, and we supported each other's towns and communities. So we're not a wait and see what kind of happens kind of crew. If anybody else has to add to that.
Says it pretty well.
Agreed.
So I was in and out of your schools before COVID, and when COVID hit and all the changes started evolving, that's pretty much when my retirement started, and I wasn't really in the trenches for a good deal of it. I knew about a lot of the things, and I knew that there were tensions among you all in different places. I would very much like to hear, I don't think I've heard too many districts that merged as you did, where you basically, and correct me if as needed, you've held on to ownership of your elementary settings more or less and played a lot more with emerging kinds of things with the middle school, high school arena. Is that a fair summation, or does that need revision?
I'm not sure that's a fair assessment. I think that the mergers that occurred happened between towns that, primarily within towns that had some efficiencies that they saw they could align with each other. One of the particular districts had a high school, no longer has a high school, but I don't think it was an intention of the merger in itself to say, we don't want a high school anymore. And there was another district that merged that does have a high school where I think as a result of that merger, they have seen a lot of benefit from many perspectives in terms of the merger. So I don't want to leave the impression that that the reason why mergers occurred were solely as a result of we want to play in this arena and not this other arena. It was really a thoughtful, concerted effort by the communities.
So there was a Rochester High School, and then there was, Chelsea was a K-12, so they had their high school.
Correct.
And then you had Bethel that had a high school, and you had here that had a high school. In the process, and I agree, I don't think Rochester ever intended to phase out, but that seemed to be in the works. And Chelsea has always had the really small numbers, and they needed, for numbers wise, to make other things happen. And then there was a good deal of dynamics happening between making around the Bethel being where the middle school is now and high school now being here. Is there any corrections that are needed on that score?
No, when we merged Chelsea, so I'm from Tunbridge, and we merged with Chelsea. And when we merged with them, Chelsea approached us and said, we're not going to be able to keep our high school open. We don't have enough students. So instead of closing 3 years from now, we think it would be more advantageous to try to look at merging and being 2 K-8 systems and merging. And yeah, there was, I'm not gonna lie, it was rough, and there was lots of angst, and there was lots of unhappy people, but we worked through it, and now I think we came out stronger for it. We work really well together. We have our K-4 in Tunbridge and our 5-8 in Chelsea with a pre-K in Chelsea. So, and we're moving right along, and things are doing great, and the communities have melded together pretty well now. I wouldn't know which child is from which campus anymore because we're one school.
And at this point, would you say that the communities are pretty much supportive of the present scenario?
Yeah, I would. Maybe 3 years ago, I wouldn't have said that, but now I would say that, yeah. 3 years ago, I wouldn't have thought we'd be where we are, but we are. It worked well. The advantage I see to becoming partners with this system is we have the chance to maybe recommend what would be good partners, and then it gets decided on by the state, and we don't have to go through as much. Act 46 was very emotional, it was a very long process because of the emotion. So if they're gonna draw lines, it would be nice if we could maybe have our input on the lines now, and it's the state's fault then. I guess is how I look at it. I think that we should be talking to each other about different districts about what could work and what won't work, and be proactive.
I'm sort of curious. So we use our board governance, we use policy governance. And I don't know what you use for your governance style for your board, and how would you use a different governance style? How would you anticipate that would work? I don't know if you're familiar with our governance style.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, the proclamation that the SU board's made is that we are interested in remaining a supervisory union that's currently made up the current member districts, but that the board is interested in looking at contiguous districts to change the boundaries of the supervisory union. So if a district operated under a policy governance, that district within the supervisory union could continue as a school district
Mhm.
to operate with policy governance, with the understanding being that the SU board doesn't operate under policy governance. Although I think if you were to watch a lot of our meetings, you would see a lot of similarities. I'm looking at board members, like we don't practice under a policy governance model, but you'd see a lot of similarities of it being a little bit more hybrid in the sense of we spend a great deal of time focused on student achievement, ends reports around student achievement, social emotional reports. The boards have goals. We report out regularly on our strategic plan. There's benchmarks within the strategic plan that we report out on. I know you would call that ends, but we don't call it ends, but you would see benchmarks. And the board is not focused on operations. Like if you were to watch their meetings, that you would see them very focused on student achievement outcome indicators, policy work. We consider our budget to be our largest policy statement annually in regards to how does that support the strategic plan. But we have not adopted policy governance.
But you are familiar with it.
Absolutely. Certainly, board members have been here for some time, and certainly I am as the current superintendent.
And that's true not just for the supervisory union, but for the individual districts. We don't run the school. We provide direction to the school. And there are very few instances in which we get enmeshed in the day-to-day issues of the school.
And I work, in my day job, I overlap with your district in a lot of different roles. I'm the Blueprint Program Manager at Gifford, so I work a lot with supporting primary care and how they support students in the district. So I'm familiar, you guys are really well entrenched in your community, you're really responsive to community initiatives. And I think that's a real strength of your district. And I think about as things grow and change, and you've already had the opportunity to grow and change in the last few years, that there are benefits and disadvantages to growth and change. And as you're thinking about sort of widening the scope or the geographic boundaries of your district, what do you think some of those advantages and disadvantages are of widening and, as potential districts joining, what would be some of the disadvantages and the advantages to the partnership?
I'm happy to jump in with that one.
Okay, go ahead. I haven't.
So one of the things that has been on my mind for quite a bit ever since our legislature and the governor enacted the law is the size of an SU. One of the real strengths of the WVRSU is that we have a superintendent who is visible and committed to each one of the schools that are a part of the SU. I fear that a widening of those responsibilities is going to be an incredibly hard ask that will continue to have superintendents that are facile with what is going on in a particular school in a particular moment in time, and that the relationships that this particular superintendent has created with faculty, staff, and community members will suffer as a result of, I looked at the numbers. In order to create close to a 4,000 student district in our area, we're looking at a district that is ginormous. And I cannot.
What's your numbers right now?
What are our numbers? I don't have.
We're about 1,700 as an SU.
Right. So that is a real challenge that I see with the merger of supervisory districts and unions moving forward. And that's regardless of how good we happen to be or not happen to be. It is a commentary on where we are as a state.
I would say, for me, if I was to see an advantage, I would say I think we operate our supervisory union extremely well. We do extremely well with budgeting. I think I would much rather be able to pick my partner, like I said before, and get to know them and work that way, rather than having the state come in and put somebody that completely makes no sense or isn't contiguous with us, in, to just put that together. I think, we have a lot of towns in our district that are school choice, and I don't see any of them changing their mind or changing that model willingly. So for us, a supervisory union is not just about school choice, but it's part of who we are. And we get to keep our small schools that way. And I think that that's one of the most important things to me, is being able to keep our small schools and keep our kids.
When you
close to
say
home.
school choice, are you largely referencing middle school, high school kind of options, or is
High
that
school.
elementary too? High school, strictly high school?
Yeah,
Middle and high school, and we have one district that's not operating.
And
K-12,
ballpark,
Granville, Hancock.
how many, ballpark, I don't expect you to have the exact count, but how many students are you talking about that opt for the school choice?
Well, as far as non-operating districts, only one is a fully operating K-12 district, right? The other remaining 5 districts have some level of non-operating grades that result in choice. Because of example, Rochester Stockbridge merged, they closed the Rochester High School, so they have choice in grades 7 through 12. And so Granville Hancock closed their elementary school back when the SUs merged, so they have complete choice K-12. I believe we've got about 400 students that we don't operate a grade level for, which results in them having choice. I just looked at my data guru and he gave me a head nod, so that's about
When you
right.
say choice, is this a choice for some of those?
Absolutely. So
Okay, so
we have
how many are
83
non-
students that choose to attend White River Unified District.
How many are outside of the White River system, Sharon Academy or Thetford?
So out of 400, so that leaves about 300 and change that choose other. We have students in about 40 different secondary schools across the state.
How do you, just help me remember, how do you decide, so you have each community or each district has their board, and then you send representatives to
the full board.
The full board. So how is that is that by population? How is it determined? I'm curious what the setup is.
So how
We
many?
just went through this.
Yes.
Yeah, it's in the bylaws.
So we have a set of bylaws. And the bylaws call for representation at this board to be 3 members from each district that is operating, and 1 member from a district that is a non-operational district. So unfortunately, our friends in Granville Hancock, and I point at the screen because Stacy's there, they only get 1 seat at the table, while the rest of the operating districts get 3 seats at the table. And we see each other, and actually I think this is one of the benefits of the SU system, is we see each other as co-equal at this table. So all of our voices are, and Kathy makes sure that all of our voices are heard.
Yeah, if we have something that's a tough topic, we work through it until we're pretty close to consensus or people can be warm with it. And I would say we do important work at each of our individual boards, but the majority of our work is done at this full board. Like most of the things that we govern are here.
Yeah, and that was actually before our district unified. We had the little elementary districts, but most of the work was done at the SU board meeting. And then we just did a few things at the smaller ones.
Not to keep on talking, but one of the other benefits that I see to our model is that it actually, by virtue of me being an elected official in Stratford, it keeps us accountable to our constituencies. And so the notion of community involvement is, I think, really important for us. I'm not saying that your model doesn't allow for that, but this model really puts our feet to the fire as it relates to ensuring that we are keeping smaller communities informed of what's going on.
Now, how does your board work?
So we have one board meeting that has representation from, and we had to do, when we unified, we had to do it by population, but the smaller communities were concerned about being overpowered by the larger Randolph community. And so we were able to work it out so that we have an 8-member board, which is a little unusual. So we have 4 representatives from Randolph and then 2 from Brookfield and 2 from Braintree. And that way the smaller communities can sort of, if they feel like the larger community is kind of going, they can kind of, and then everyone votes in everyone. So each community votes for the representation, for the representative, even if they don't live in that town.
And you don't have school choice, correct?
We do not have school choice.
Okay.
You recently, correct me if I'm wrong, it could be tomorrow instead of just recently, but we're involved in presenting things to the legislative committee that was, that's looking at the issue as far as the redistricting. Can you comment on how that went and what kinds of concerns or thought provocations that you gave them to consider?
So we made a proclamation, the SU board did, that we submitted under public comment, and Kathy read into the record, indicating that the WVRSU and member districts want to remain in SU and their desires to continue to work together, but that they are open to creating a larger geographical region within the SU structure to try to work to meet 4,000 students, with the caveat that the bill doesn't say you have to get between 4,000 to 8,000, right? Understanding that there could be difficulties in regards to sparsity and ruralness in order to meet that. And so that's what's been submitted to the task force. We actually have 2 task force members here tonight, one online, Representative Holcomb and Dr. Jay Badams, who's going to talk to us about the task force and allow for an open conversation with the board as well, which you're more than welcome, I believe, to continue with us.
Yes, they will listen. Hopefully they can answer your questions too.
You know, what I would say is that in regards to testimony that we've provided as an SU, is that we believe that an SU is critical for local democracy and to ensure that there is decision-making happening that's personalized enough to understand what the ramifications could be if you were to close one of our small rural schools. And we're very concerned, as an SU board example, if you were to get to 4,000, that would result in a SD, possibly from here up to Barry, and that board that's made up of 16 towns across 4 counties probably won't understand necessarily what an impact may be if you were to close a school like Rochester Elementary as an example, which would result in impacting not only Rochester, but that entire valley, because we have about 30 tuition students from Granville Hancock that utilize Rochester Elementary.
Does Stockbridge do?
And we still operate Stockbridge Central School as
Stockbridge
well.
still independent? Or is it?
Stockbridge and Rochester are merged district, but they have K-6 school in each town.
Any other questions for us? Other thoughts?
I just want to reiterate that the local voice is a huge consideration for us. Just don't want to lose that. So moving to preempt, what's happening in Montpelier with looking at and considering larger configuration to ensure that we can maintain those small schools and those local boards is really a very high priority for us.
Now, in the group setting, each of the groups are working with their elementary kinds of scenarios. Are you as a group managing the high school as the one for the district, or Does that have, that's still under just the, okay. Special ed is underneath,
The SU.
Yes,
and what else is under the SU?
yeah.
So we've centralized food service, we've centralized maintenance and facilities in regards to staffing. We've centralized special education, we've centralized transportation services. Policy, we have a policy on policies that they are developed at the SU level, that there's not individual district policies. We work to get to consensus in order for policies to be adopted. Also, in regards to at the SU level, curriculum is adopted at the SU.
So that's a pre-K.
Technology is SU.
Yeah, pre-K through 12.
Pre-K through 12.
And does that include a tech center somewhere in your setting?
You are our regional tech center.
Thank you.
And that's a real efficiency and a huge cost savings for us. So on Sharon Elementary School with 150 students, pre-K through 6, doesn't have to then go out and hire or try to find someone to coordinate special education services on a part-time basis, which is an impossibility in this market. So we're able to share those services, that oversight, and we get the benefit of being able to talk and coordinate with other schools and have the benefit of all those minds. So that can be true then across the board with all of those entities that Jamie just listed.
But then music and art and gym and all those are under the individual.
Yeah, they're all employed as local district employees. You have to have an identified employer, so we share those type of positions across the SU. So if we have a example physical education teacher working across multiple districts, we employ them at the SU level and then bill back their FTE to the district. And all of our collective bargaining agreements are at the SU level.
Wow, that's interesting. So how does that work? So you, wait.
Carefully.
So
You can join us on the committee.
We have a negotiations council that's appointed from each district board, and they negotiate at the SU level, and then the SU board and the district boards ratify their agreement together.
so each community is then paying their teachers the same?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay. Hmm,
and working conditions are the same district to district.
yeah.
I would add as a teacher of many years that that's essential for the well-being and the cohesiveness of the operations across the SU.
I would add the efficiencies we hear a lot about in regards to SDs being more efficient to SUs. I would argue we've already been able to find those efficiencies within the SU model.
By doing that, yeah.
Now, just ask it, is the after-school program separate?
That's an SU
That's
run
an SU,
program.
okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Folks, thank you so much for this. I've heard a few times already tonight that, hey, by existing like this, we were able to keep open our small schools. I think I've heard that twice. Give me a quick rundown of why that is. What is it about the element of this entity that allows your small schools like Brookfield, like Braintree, that have about 100 students? What is it about the supervisory union that allows those kind of places to stay open? Thank you.
I'm not sure that I would say that it has necessarily created a vehicle to allow schools to be open or to remain open. We certainly lost a high school in Chelsea and we lost a high school in Rochester. So I don't want to pretend like this model is somehow panacea as it relates to the non-closure of schools. What I would say is that by virtue of the way that we are structured, we take pains to ensure that we understand the effects of our actions within the communities that we serve. And it's not to say that other models don't do that. I think we just, by virtue of being elected so locally, are accountable to our neighbors in ways that are just different.
Are Hancock and Granville still both operating, or did they?
No, that's why they have complete choice. They're a non-operating district.
Okay, and neither one of them have an elementary then, right?
Correct.
Correct. And just to be clear, we closed those elementary schools prior to Act 46.
Yes.
But Ryan, can I just follow up on your question? Can you hear me okay?
I can. Thank
Um,
you.
I think speaking as a school board member from a small elementary program, again, I want to get back to the efficiencies that we experience being part of a really thoughtful and effectively run supervisory union office. So the fact that we have access and expertise that's shared at that level allows us to operate in a way that I think would be very difficult to imagine if we were trying to run that. I think we'd price ourselves out of existence on our own, honestly. So the model is key. Obviously, by virtue of maintaining a functioning educational entity, you have a viable place for families to move. So hopefully you keep your population base up. So these things are all interrelated. But I would say the functioning of the supervisory union as this core unit that provides services and oversight for us that we would not be able to afford on our own is a key element.
Where are the cost savings that you experienced there to make it happen?
Well, Tara is sitting right here in front of me, and she's the business manager for the SU. I can't imagine as a Sharon School Board member where I would find that level of expertise and commitment at a part-time basis who would know and understand our school and be able to integrate that into all of the rest of this decision-making. And then right next to her is Anda, who does Chief Operating Officer with looking at curriculum development, professional development across the SU. Ray is doing ITs right behind her. So we have the benefit of all of that. You can't find those people at 15 or 20% to run a small school.
Jamie has something.
And I think that there's a good example in our SU in regards to Rochester Stockbridge. That district is operating 2 K-6 schools because they know how that best serves their community within those 2 towns. I worry about a larger SD board not understanding why that's efficient and how they've structured it. If you look at their per pupil spending in Stockbridge, it's not much more than it is in some of my larger districts. But having that school open is important to those that community as a unified district with those 2 communities. I don't believe board members in Chelsea would understand why that's important. But they can come together within the SU model and make decisions around an SU, how to be as efficient as possible. But the Chelsea board members aren't going to vote to close the Stockbridge school. And then where I have and that I think our board members have in a much larger SD, you could have someone making decisions that aren't personalized in regards to how's that going to affect the local community, because I'm multiple towns or multiple counties away in regards to making the decision to close Stockbridge. So the example that I've given multiple times is we had the Roxbury Montpelier Unified Union School District. That budget went down and the decision by that board was to close Roxbury. That is something that I think our board members are concerned about, right? Like if Rochester Stockbridge decides they're going to reconfigure Stockbridge, Rochester Stockbridge Unified District Board is going to decide that, not the SU board.
Thank you. That's helpful. I mean, and I can totally understand that where, if we don't join the supervisory union, then there's a larger kind of rolling of the dice where we are at the mercy of some faceless bureaucrat up north somewhere, right? So, yeah, I get it.
I think also our model answers the geography issue because we're if I was going to go from here to Stratford, that's going to take me an hour. We're all working together, but we all have our own space for our kids.
Yep. And we also have a deeper understanding too of the issues that we all share, like Brookfield and Braintree, very similar to Rochester and Stockbridge, very still similar to Stratford, right? We're all small, very rural, very dirt road places. So yeah, I get it.
I also want to just give kudos to Jamie, because if you talk to teachers or you talk to board members, different people in the community, you have a very strong feeling that Jamie's doing a great job.
And I like that he's been everywhere too. I mean, Jamie, you've been Williamstown, Randolph, Jesus Crow. You live up in.
I've been through exit 2 to 5 a lot. You are absolutely right.
Yeah. So
We're not
I
letting him
mean,
go
you kind of get our region. You get our.
I had Ann's kids, yeah.
I don't know. Have you jumped off the floating bridge this summer? Does that counts here? You know.
That's right. Have fish off.
And if I may, I think a lot of what's being said goes back to what Kevin said about choosing your partner. Because our area is fairly unique in a way of, Vermont is sparse, right? I used to work in Williston in an office, and I talked to people about school board and various things going on in my neighborhood, and they're, it's like I'm speaking a foreign language. They just, what do you mean? I had to enunciate when I said I'm from South Royalton, because they would assume I was talking about South Burlington, and they'd say, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So our area, we know our neighbors. I go grocery shopping in Randolph. I'm in Randolph probably 3 or 4 times a week at minimum. I play recreational sports in Randolph. I go to Stratford all the time. My kids just finished a soccer game with Rochester. So I think it's really important that we can understand the communities a little bit better in that sort of partnership. It doesn't mean I know what's going on in your town, but it's not a completely foreign entity to me, like South Burlington would be. I don't understand things in South Burlington as well as I do in South Royalton. So.
You don't know everything that's going on in Brookfield?
No, but the point stands, right? That it's not so far away. We are very similar in a way. So choosing your partner is important, because I can say, no, I don't know your town that well, but I understand, and I have neighbors and I have family even that do understand that I could bounce those ideas off of.
No, you're right. I can more easily emphasize with South Royalton than I could with Montpelier or Barrie.
I just want to add, as a newer board member, and especially from someone who's new to Vermont school systems and everything that we're going through right now, there has been this fabulous advantage in that there has been this collective wisdom and knowledge of, from kind of on every level. And so it's like, while there's so much I'm learning as I go, being able to kind of tap into perspectives across the supervisory union and engage with Jamie as well, I've been able to learn quite a lot, but from so many different levels and perspectives. And each town has its unique challenges, or each kind of, the schools have their own unique challenges. And so we can kind of pool our resources together to figure out, oh, you're having this challenge. We had this challenge a few years ago. And so there's this kind of this ease of access as well, where we're also pooling those particular resources and experience on a whole different level, with a different level of coordination.
So Jamie, have you encountered any other school districts within Vermont that operate on a similar level? I won't say same level, but similar.
You mean as SUs?
Where it's the merger of all kinds of smaller communities.
Well, I think during Act 46, we went through a great deal of merging already, which I think is one of the things that frankly, scared us a bit in regards to Act 73, is that we've already done a lot of this work. We felt like we merged 2 SUs into one. We went from 10 single town school districts into 4 unified districts and 2 single town school districts. But yes, as you start to look up to the north, there's many districts that have done this work and done it well, and done it within the SU umbrella, and that coordinate services, much like what I just described within the SU setting.
And have you been able to make Montpelier hear the small rural community needs?
Well, we were able to get them to include supervisory unions as one of the maps, which we thought was a significant win. And the SU board in SU districts joined the Rural School Community Alliance, which now has, it's well over 115 towns or school districts that are part of it. We were one of the early joiners to that group. that have been working together and trying to educate folks in regards to why SUs that support school districts within the SU setting are critical in order to ensure local democracy and voice. And so, you know, we have 2 task force members in front of us tonight. One of their maps is going to include an SU. I would argue if we hadn't done that work, that they might not even be looking at an SU map as one of the viable structures going forward, because there was a lot of momentum to have it only be supervisory districts. So.
All right, well, I think we've taken a lot of your time and you're waiting on them. And you've opened that up for us to listen to as well. So my board, if any of you want to stay to hear.
It's a public meeting.
Yeah,
welcome,
absolutely.
so-
That's right.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Ask them where they're at.
Are you,
Thanks,
so
Chris.
if you're done, then you're gonna adjourn yours, but
Okay.
I think Kathy wants to say something.
Where are you guys at? What are your thoughts?
We have been exploring and we've talked to the districts north of us to kind of get a sense of where they're at, what they're thinking. And so we're not quite sure yet exactly where we're gonna go, but we wanted to kind of see what our options are in terms of other districts and other districts' interest in sort of working together. We also have an initiative put together, and I'm going to let Michael tell you about that.
Oh, you guys are, people from the White River Valley Supervisory Union are joining it. We have the Up for Learning is doing student-led visioning of what a regional district could look like, not governance-wise, but what it should be, what it should offer, what do kids need in today's world from education, right? Staying away from the governance. They're not making any decisions there, but what's going on? And we've got a team actually coming to that, so it's kind of cool. My bet is when Emil and Ann meet with me, I think it's next week, we have to meet to build our agenda. One of the big agenda items is going to be to debrief this meeting and to see what people think. And I'll bet they're going to be able to answer that question a whole lot better after that meeting, Kathy.
Nice. All right. Well, keep us posted. Keep talking to us. Whatever you guys need or think, I'm happy to talk to. If you get questions after you go, just shoot me an email.
Have you had other districts reach out after your proclamation in this same sort of curiosity conversation?
We did have Lincoln attended one of our meetings and reached out, so we have had them officially come to a meeting and reach out. Have you had?
Some preliminary conversations with Echo Valley, which is a K-8 district that's part of the Central Vermont Supervisory Union. And I believe they're taking that up officially at a board meeting here this month in regards to whether they want to join a meeting in the coming month or not.
All right.
If you need someone to come and attend from this board, not that we all don't already go to a few meetings, but should ask.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
It would be helpful.
Okay.
Always welcome. It's the second Tuesday of the month.
Second Wednesday.
Second Wednesday, sorry.
Love it.
I've driven all over from Barry over to Lake Maury today, all day there, then up to here, and been an adventure.
Well, you guys are definitely welcome to stay. Like you said, it's a public meeting. If you want to stay as open as a board, and if you've got questions, feel free to ask. So.
You just need to adjourn yours so I can use their recording.
Okay, so we're adjourning at 6:55.
Perfect.
All right. Again, thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
All right. So now,
Yeah.
updates on Act 70. Where are we at, Jamie?
With Representative Holcomb and Dr. J. Batters.
All right. So you guys are up. Would you like to make introductions to the people here? You heard
I'll
the
defer to Representative Holcomb. Hi, I can't see Jay. Is Jay in the room?
Yes.
I am.
Okay, good. Jay, I'm glad you're there. Um, Thank you. I'm actually glad we got to hear your community conversations. I'm Rebecca Holcomb. I am the representative in Windsor Orange 2, which includes Sharon and Stratford. I should probably be transparent up front that I actually voted against Act 73 because I had severe concerns that while we have real problems, that this particular bill was not going to be helping move us towards solutions, and it was going to create a lot of consternation that might get in the way of actually tackling our challenges. I'll let Jay speak to some of the work that the Act 73 work group has been doing. I did want to just put a couple things on your radar that are concerns that you should keep in mind. One of the first things that the task force had to grapple with is that there are no goals in the bill, nor is there a clear statement of the problem that we're trying to solve. And I think we felt pretty clearly that we needed to be able to come back to people if we were producing plans and explain how this was going to make life better in your communities if we were going to stand behind those plans. So we've done some work to articulate what goals might be and also to come up with a set of criteria that every plan has to be evaluated against. One of the things I wanted to just lay out, because I didn't hear it come up at all, is the issue of the funding formula. You might ask, why are we here? What are we doing? We kind of lost our hair about affordability, and the governor came out and proposed to move the entire state into 4 big school choice districts. I think we all realized that that was a scale that would have had you connected with people all the way to the Canadian border. Didn't make sense. That was a non-starter. It wasn't going anywhere. But somehow that assumption that the way to move forward would be redistricting or remapping the state would be the solution. The solution, the reason they're talking about districting, however, is because to transition to the new funding formula, you actually do need to transition to bigger districts. And so you need to understand that this is being driven by a conversation around the funding formula and concern that the current funding formula is driving higher spending. It is not driven by the belief that redistricting is going to lead to automatically better outcomes or lower cost. The way the savings that were talked about were achieved when the governor was explaining, 200 million in savings, was by attaching pandemic era inflation rates to spending under our current funding formula, but assuming only 2% inflation rates every year moving forward if we shift to this new funding formula. And as you know, that is below the baseline level of inflation. And so effectively, it's a way to right-size education spending by just capping what you can spend. And that would be the intent. It will also reallocate spending quite significantly in the state. Some of our towns would lose quite a bit of funding. Others would be spending a lot more and might have higher tax rates to go with that. But it's a pretty significant change. And I don't think I need to tell you, because you're dealing with it day to day, this also happens at a moment of both declining capacity at the agency to support good work around special ed or improvement of teaching and learning, but also at a moment when we are starting to lose federal funds, and federal funding cuts could have quite a significant impact on some of our districts, including in your supervisory union. So I just wanted you to understand that context, because that is something that you're going to have to grapple with at the local level as well. The other issue is that we are losing small schools now. I think we lost 5 or 6 small schools last year. Our continued problem is one of depopulation, and we have schools that are serving a much smaller population under a per pupil funding formula. When you lose students, you lose funding. And so one of the challenges is figuring out in that context how to make sure that we're still providing the support and we have the capacity to support kids and give them the services they need. And I do want to commend in particular, I feel like I have to give a shout out to some of the community schools work that's gone on that not only has been proven to be very good for attendance and engagement, but I think is really playing a powerful role in knitting some of your communities together. So there's just a lot going on. I'm so grateful to you for giving this time to try to lead your community. And I am, I'm mindful that this is a complicated and very painful process for everybody. I've been going to meetings pretty much every day this week, and will be next week as well. So with that, I just wanted to throw a couple more things to consider. Again, this is about district mergers, and that means they are talking about consolidation of 4,000 to 8,000. I haven't been able to find any evidence that supports that as the optimal size. There are some real risks associated to it. The caveat word was practical, and you are one of the most sparsely populated regions in the state. I would actually argue that the southern tier is even more sparsely populated at this point than the Northeast Kingdom. We tend to think of the Northeast Kingdom. In some ways, the indicators coming out of the southern tier are even worse. And we really need to have a plan. Someone was talking to me about creating public education preserves because we may have no schools in those regions in the future if we don't have some way to stabilize some of those regions. So, think about that. Don't forget the funding formula when you think about voice, because if this new funding formula goes in effect, you will not be voting on your budget anymore because you will be just given the amount of money that the state has decided that's necessary, and you won't have to vote at all, because unless you choose to spend more than 5% above that base block grant, that is what is in that bill. In terms of, I actually, one of the reasons I actually disagree, Jamie, I think we would have had to have a supervisory union bill anyway, because of that practical thing. If you travel around the rural regions of the state, there's just no way we can have a single supervisory district at this point in some places. But there are risks to expanding supervisory unions. You've got an amazing superintendent who's willing to drive to each of your communities. If Jamie, the answer can't just be a supervisory union with 25 districts. That doesn't work either. So one of the things that you are likely to see some conversation around is a BOCES bill. And I know Jamie has talked about this in some contexts as well, but it's a boards of collaborative education services. When I was a principal in a small rural school, the state provided support for professional development statewide. We actually had graduate level courses in my school of 120 kids on site in literacy and in numeracy, and we had people from neighboring schools come and get their graduate level courses in professional development on our site. The state doesn't have that capacity anymore. It's gutted that capacity entirely out. I think it's penny wise, pound foolish. Right now, your superintendent is trying to bring all the teachers into contact with the best available research on literacy instruction. That's happening 59 times over across the state. That's the kind of thing the state used to do. The state could do it again. Or these regional boards of education services could take responsibility for some of those issues around professional development. Another area where the state could provide some additional support is by taking on some of the work around students with extraordinary needs in particular, but students with disabilities. So you'll see some kind of work come out around that as well. There's some other work coming out. I know Scott Beck from the Northeast Kingdom, he's the senator who really pushed the bigger districts and pushed this bill across the line. And he's now, I think, hedging back the other way, but he's coming in with a bill organized around CTE districts. And Jay and I have been working on some issues around if we had regional high schools and they were a little bit bigger size and we made some construction money available. Is there a way in some places to target resources if and when we get construction money that allow communities that really need a new high school building? And some of you are grappling with this. There's a high school that has had sewage backing up into its main some of its main spaces for over 10 years, and they can't float a bond. They've been trying repeatedly to get a bond across the line. They can't get it. There are other places where the buildings have had so much trouble with PCBs that they're really looking at whether they just need to start over. And some of these communities have said, hey, we want to hold on to our elementary schools, but if we work together at the high school level, are there ways to do sort of what South Royalton and Bethel did, where if we work together, we're at sufficient scale to offer really comprehensive programming? And that does make sense in some places. It'll never be the right answer in every place. I was up at Blue Mountain. They're so far away from everybody. It's pretty hard to think about, how you do that kind of work in that region. But the couple things I would say for myself, I know that the state has an affordability problem. I know we have a quality problem in that we're not adequately supporting our students the way they need to around academics and improving academics, but also, frankly, we are really struggling. Vermont has chosen to deliver social services through through the education fund to kids, and our kids are hurting in some communities, and they really need that support. Right now, we're in a situation where when the state cuts the funding for mental health through the designated agencies, that's going to fall back into local budgets. And one of the things we need to have an honest conversation about is how we support the needs of our kids, but do it at scale so that we can wrap ourselves around schools and let schools do the amazing things that they do on a daily basis for our kids. I wish the conversation had not pivoted to the small schools. It's hard to know how you educate kids given the sparsity of some of our regions if we start taking out those small schools. The big cost driver and the challenges that we're hearing tend to be in areas where, you know, what we're seeing is when your high school gets below around 150, it really struggles, frankly, to provide the options and the breadth and the depth that the kids need. You know, if you've got one math teacher, because that's all you're big enough to have, and your kid hates that one teacher, they're not going to have a great math experience. That's just the way it goes. A slightly bigger school, you can have slightly more options, every teacher can have a colleague. Your single science teacher doesn't have to teach physics and biology and chemistry. You can have a little bit more breadth of programming and really play to people's strengths. So I think in the commission, in the task force, we don't get to do anything but draw the lines. And Phil Scott jumped into this conversation and said, just draw the lines, it's easy. And I think it's now clear that it's not so easy. And so I think we're taking a much more measured approach. Our hope is that we can end this by providing some direction. And Jay I don't speak for the commission, Jay will have, or for the task force, Jay will have different thoughts as well, and that's great. But to be able to provide the legislature with better data, we finally have gotten data out of the education agency for the first time on some of it. We have hopefully some directions that are promising. I think we're pretty excited about some of the stuff we're starting to hear from the people coming in to present on BOCES. Jay's done some amazing work thinking about, you know, if in those regions that really need to think differently about high school, what are some of the opportunities? And my hope is we can put out some options that people will be able to look at and say, this works, that doesn't work, what can we do? But do it in a much more measured way that is a little bit more responsive to the actual needs of communities on the ground. Again, I would not assume anything is baked in stone. The legislature has a way of setting up these task forces as a way of just pushing pause. And as Scott Beck has already said, and he's very powerful in the Senate, anything we do will get changed anyway. So it's also possible that this could all fall apart next year. So my final observation would be to always lead for your kids and your communities. And if to the extent that there are potential opportunities to do better for your kids by collaborating in different ways, feel free to surface those and please share those. But don't assume and don't make rash changes now in anticipation of something that might or might not materialize. Right now, especially given some of the chaos at the federal level and the state level, I think it's really important that you continue to provide the caring, loving, stable leadership you can provide to your kids and to your system while we figure all of this out. And I wish I had a better way of saying thank you, because I really appreciate what you do, and I don't think we've made it easy for you, and I apologize for that.
All right. Mike? Please. All right. My name is Jay Bounds. I am, as of August 1st, a recovering superintendent after having been one for 18 years. So I am not only impressed by, but super grateful for, and in some ways sympathetic, Jamie, and what you have to do in leading, especially an organization this complex and large. I threw my name in the hat for this task force because I saw this amazing snap of the finger plan for redistricting the whole state of Vermont into 4 or 5 districts. And I've been through this before on a smaller scale as superintendent of the city of Erie, Pennsylvania, which when I started had 13,000 students and 23 schools. And by the time I left Erie, had 18 schools and about 11,000 students. We lost about 2,000 to charter schools. We took our community through that whole redistricting and downsizing, they call it right sizing process over a 3-year period. When I heard that this task force was going to have this charge, that we were going to carry this out from essentially September to the beginning of December, I thought, an impossible task? Sure, why not? I'll volunteer. A big reason I wanted to volunteer is as a resident and taxpayer in the town of Stratford. And now with my 4 adult children living in Tunbridge, Stratford, and then one sort of half the time in Stratford while she's in school at the law school, I've got more than just a professional curiosity, a very vested interest in this process. My son just got married and is fixing up a house about 4 houses down from the Newton School. And really likes the idea of his kids walking there every day and being able to walk them. So I'm super sensitive to the whole idea of keeping our small schools intact and in fact strengthening them. Having been a superintendent in a large district through redistricting, I'm also very, very keenly interested in making sure that we're good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And so I think in this whole discussion, Rebecca started talking about the BOCES concept, which I think is really, really promising for many of our districts. And I think that's something that we're really going to need to dig into, even though it's not really the primary charge. We were told we have to make it no more than 3 maps, one of which must include supervisory unions. That's our task. We've actually been chided by a fellow task force member that really let's just get to it. Let's just make some maps. So might as well do it on one of those little magic chalkboards where you write on it and you just pull the cellophane up and it goes away. There are a lot of issues we need to grapple with in order to make a map that's meaningful. We've been having that argument, and Rebecca mentioned that we're not even completely clear on what the parameters are. What is the problem we're solving? Because when I first started hearing about this and became interested in participating, it sounded like it was, you need to save money, budgets are going down in flames, and we have a spending crisis. And having presided over a lot of budgets in the Norwich School District and in the Interstate School District in Dresden, we were putting forward budgets that had very, very little increase in operating costs. Anything we had control over was going up minimally. And so this notion that we're spending too much really, really angered me, to be honest. Because there were a lot of other reasons, things like healthcare. When the state took over collective bargaining for healthcare, we were supposed to be seeing some kind of savings, I would anticipate, but instead we're seeing 15, 16% annual increases. It's a huge chunk of our budget. I don't see that changing anytime soon. So for all of those reasons, I wanted to be on this committee, if nothing else, to at least offer a little bit of practical feedback and input. I really appreciate being here to hear your conversation. I took several notes. I hope no one was panicking that I was writing on my pad here, but it was interesting hearing the services that the SU provides, because when we talked about the BOCES model, in places that don't have an organized structure like this SU, there are people paying for things like speech pathology, and they'll have full business offices, and they're operating an organization that might only be one school, but they're providing services that, like, for example, our district could have taken on very easily: payroll, all those sorts of things, HR. And I think what this sort of crisis is forcing us to do is have conversations like this. It's unfortunate that we're reacting to the pressure of the legislative action and the governor's sort of dictum, but here we are. And I think one of the things I hope to get out of this process, because it really does feel in many ways to me like a fool's errand. And I just retired and I have now 3 grandchildren and would love to be spending time playing with them. But instead, for 3 hours today, I got bleary-eyed sitting with my son in Tunbridge, who does GIS work, trying to model some maps And I don't want this to be a fool's errand. I don't want this to be us wasting our time. And I think one of the good things that could come of this is surfacing some good ideas for us to find economies of scale where possible, to find ways to improve quality in places where they can't necessarily afford to have as many curricular offerings as some schools can offer, and to do so in a way that preserves the character of our communities and our towns and our school systems. And that's not something we do in 8 meetings between August and December. I get the urgency. The urgency is really this notion that, oh, budgets will fail. But I think there needs to be a statewide collective deep breath and acknowledgement that, yeah, there are some efficiencies out there. There are things we could do better and differently, but we need time. And we need groups like this who are taking time away from our regularly scheduled board business to talk about these larger statewide issues. I'm hoping we can get there, and I'm hoping we can have a few wins that will help us to make better use of the Ed Fund and to provide services for kids who need them in places that are sparse, so that the inequities that are often identified and that are the target of some degree of correction in this process, that we can make progress on those as well. So that's a lot for, that's all I have to say for now on that. But I think it's going to be very interesting to your questions you might have. And I will apologize up front if I can't answer most of them. Rebecca and I are 2 members of the task force. I can't speak on behalf of the task force, but if you had the whole task force here, I don't think you could get any more specifics from the entire task force, because we're not there yet. It was interesting. We were interviewed on Vermont Public Radio, and Jamie and Rebecca and I listened to a report from Lola Dufour, the education reporter, prior to us speaking, and she predicted that we won't come up with a map until the last meeting. So maybe we'll come up with a map in December. And she also prognosticated that there will be a number of fights along the way. But we're going to have honest conversations about things like choice. Choice is an essential part of our system in some places, and in choice, it's something that we've grown fond of in other places, and isn't necessary, but we like it. So we got to decide if we're willing to pay for it, because if we've got empty seats in a high school, and we're letting students go to any school they like, then we're paying to operate a school at below capacity and giving people a voucher to go somewhere else. And that's fine if that's what we want, but then I really hope that anyone enjoying that isn't complaining about increasing costs. So that said, we're here for your questions, and we'll do our best.
Questions, guys? Stacy.
Sana had her hand up first.
Oh, okay, Sana.
Thank you. So I appreciate you both taking the time to be here. I know all of us have carved out time this evening to engage on this subject. I also really, really appreciate the slowing down of a process, because at times it's felt like a runaway horse and we've got a rope tied to the horse and we are just being dragged behind, and all we can really do is steer. And so I really appreciate the thoughtfulness in taking a step back and kind of assessing like what are the community needs. What would be helpful is to first to gain some clarification around the intentionality behind, Rebecca, you mentioned in the beginning that, it's just like, okay, what are the actual goals? And my concern is that this is rooted in saving money rather than figuring out how to make our education system more efficient. And the speed at which this is happening is really disconcerting. I actually used to work for state government back in Alaska. There are some parallels in that, there are a lot of rural communities a lot of, like not a lot of, it's like tourism dependent, and we see what happens when there is a decline in tourism. The conversations that should be around how do you diversify industries and kind of find ways of attracting young families and jobs to the region. And so I guess my question is, like, if this is rooted in saving money as a result of healthcare system issues that should have been addressed previously, that this has been inherently flawed from the get-go. And so how do we course correct to ensure that this is about making our school systems more efficient and more inclusive and equitable, and not just have this focus around like, oh, we need to save money wherever we can, when the ultimate costs in the long term are not yet foreseen. Like, we don't know what that's going to look like. So that would be my first concern.
I always so appreciate you because you first of all situate in the kids, but you also have that broad perspective. So I really appreciate that you're engaged in this conversation. That feeling of being dragged on a leash, I can tell you that a solid majority of Democrats felt that way. This bill was passed, only 2 Republicans voted against it, and the leadership voted against it. And it was really a belief that they had to work with the administration. It is not a bill that has unanimous support at all, for many of the reasons that you did. I want to say one thing. One of the things I hope we can do is be hopeful about our future, because a state that cannibalizes its young people is a state that doesn't believe it has a future. And we need to take care of our kids, and we need to make these communities that families want to live, or we will have no bright future in Vermont. That said, we do have some pretty obvious structural challenges. We are, I think, the second oldest state in the nation still, and we are now about 1 person working to 1 person retired. We have the same amount of housing we've always had, but more of our housing is filled with smaller households because people are older and they don't have kids at home anymore. That means we need more housing for the same number of people. And if we can't figure out how to get workforce housing, we won't be able to support what we have. We just won't have the wallet and the resources. But it also is that, one of the solutions to some of our healthcare problems and our school problems and the depopulation is figuring out how to make this a place where there's starter homes for young families. So I'm just going to put in my plug for housing, because one of the things we all have to be doing is in our own individual communities saying, what are we doing to turn the needle on that one as well. I absolutely believe we had to slow down the process. When Phil Scott went up on his press conference and he said, just draw the lines. You don't need the data, just draw the lines. And I don't think there was anyone but 1 person on our task force who said that's a good idea. Everyone was like, you've got to be kidding me. We need some data. We need to know what the drivers of our problems of quality and cost and fairness, fundamental lack of fairness are. That means you need data. And then you need to be able to root any solution you have in those. So this committee has committed to making sure that every plan has to use data to address those very concerns. And that alone has changed the tenor. I actually think a BOCES map is a map. It's a supervisory union map. It talks about how to strengthen the capacity of people like Jamie to do good things for kids in your community. I'll give you one very concrete example of how it could actually save quite a bit of money. We've seen meteoric growth in expenditures on the very small number of kids who really have so many challenges they can't be educated in a regular classroom. Right now, the way our funding formula works, if you create an in-house program in your SU to serve those kids, you're going to spend a lot more than if you send them out to a for-profit, school that charges 3 to 4 times as much, just because of the way that funding formula is written. That has been surfaced. We will deal with that in the session. So part of what we're hoping is that we can just push pause.
Representative, I just want to correct the record. We have in-house programs, and our special ed budget is much lower.
It should be. But when you go over the top.
No, it is, not should be, it is. And because we don't get extraordinary cost reimbursement until after we spend over 66,000. So we're able to educate them internally for a lot less than 66,000. So I understand what you mean by being penalized.
Not all kids can do that, Jamie.
Created lots of programs. I don't want the board hearing that we're spending more, because that's not accurate.
Jamie, I don't think we're actually disagreeing. There are kids who cost more than 66,000 and really can't be treated. I mean, there are, and we have a map of where they are, and those kids, they may not be in your area, but we need capacity in the state regionally to provide those supportive programs. You're absolutely right. If you can keep your cost of your program under the extraordinary expenditure, you're absolutely correct. Once your kid blows past that line, you're actually better off sending them out. That's the incentive that we're trying to deal with, because what some districts are doing is the exact opposite of what you're doing, which is what districts should be doing. What they're doing instead is they're popping them out and they're spending 3 times as much. That's the problem we're trying to address. I don't think we're disagreeing. I think we agree on that. And in fact, we've spoken to you quite a bit about that because you're one of the models.
Can you tell me why you originally supported the bill? Because originally you supported the bill when it came through as 454 before it went to 73. What changed that you, I don't understand, because he said, it sounded like it was a Democrat Republican thing that you just said, but you supported it originally.
The way the legislature works is that you take the entire session, and if you listen to my floor speech, you heard me say on the floor, I have severe concerns about this bill, but I also know that we are losing schools already. We lost 5 schools across the state in rural districts, and the funding formula as it is right now is going to close some of those schools the way it currently operates. So my purpose in voting for that bill at the midterm was not to vote for that bill as it was, but to allow continued time for discussion. If enough people had voted no, there would have been no conversation at all. I took the risk that this bill would go forward, as is often done, and so that we could have a conversation about what opportunities needed to be made for kids. I chose to vote against this bill at the end because at the end, it was not a bill I felt I could support. And that's just the way a legislative deliberative body works. If you can't, to not vote yes at the midterm would have been to shut the conversation down entirely. I had hoped that we would be able to have a viable conversation. We didn't. I knew the vote that mattered was going to be the one at the end of the session. And that's the vote where I exercised my opinion on where we landed.
Thank you.
I don't think the bill mid-time was viable, and I said that at the time.
I'm wondering if anyone on the task force, and I assume you guys have thought about this, you mentioned the depopulation problem in Vermont. And I was elected by folks in Bethel, which is trying very hard to grow and has been growing somewhat, has new businesses, has younger people moving there with their children, et cetera. And I've already had conversations with young families who have said, who keep asking me, what's going on with the bill? What's going on? Are they going to have our schools still? And have talked about, we moved here from Massachusetts, we might move back. We moved here from New York State. Maybe we should move back so our son can go to his local school, et cetera. It doesn't seem to me when you were talking about short-term fixes of whatever, not thinking about the long-term implications, that's one of the implications is people can pick up and move. I know, my son went to an elementary school in Milwaukee and went to public high school and junior high in Chicago. And both times I moved to neighborhoods where he could walk to school. I'm a single parent. I thought I need to have the safety of knowing my kid can get to school safely, get home safely. And people do that. And a number of people I've talked to here are in the same situation and have no qualms whatsoever about picking up and leaving if they lose their local school.
I wish that we had taken I agree with you. I think we're hearing that everywhere we go. We also have people talking about leaving the state because of the high tax rates. And we're seeing some transition in some of our communities from residence to second homes, in part because the second home rate is now so much lower than the resident rate. So these are real issues. I voted against this bill. My concern is that we may end up putting communities through a tremendous amount of turmoil, only end up right where we are at the end. I think, as Jay said, this is a ridiculous task. It's an absurd task to be, drawing new maps in 7 meetings. I think we both felt, I'll speak for myself, that somebody's going to be at that table. It was important to be at that table to try to tap the brakes, slow the conversation down, and ask what are the things we actually can do to make our communities healthier and stronger. It's why you're seeing a BOCES bill come out and some conversation about that. I think there'll be some other conversations. We have to live within the law. The law is moving forward, and we'll see. But again, it's very possible this could all fizzle and die next session. I mean, you were talking about, someone was talking about mergers. One of the things that we were pointing out is that even just within my legislative district, by the time teachers are 7 years into the profession, there's about a $11,000 difference in salary on the pay scale. We could easily, if we merge, spend $300 million right out of the gate just on leveling up contracts, and you're not changing the footprint at all. If we have to spend $300 million right now, do we want to spend it on contracts to get the same system? Or do we want to be thinking about how to backfill for the Medicaid we're about to lose? And some of you probably just also saw what happened on the health exchange. We have really serious problems coming our way. I wish we could have not thrown the entire system into chaos as we're starting to cope with the federal chaos. My hope is that we can look at this, as Sana said, take a deep breath and say, what are the really serious challenges and risks we have? And how do we work better with our communities to try to provide real solutions to our kids? I'm very worried about that loss of Medicaid. I love our teachers. I'd pay them twice as much as we could. If we're going to lose that much money right out of the gate, I'd rather put it to keeping kids safe.
Stacy, I'm sorry, we've been going around. We haven't got back to you yet.
That's okay. I'm still here. So first, thank you both for being here. I really appreciate all the time that's gone into it. Rebecca, I apologize for the state of your inbox during most of the session. But I mentioned that because as you saw from that inbox, and as Kathy alluded to at the start of the meeting, this SU is not a wait and see SU. So you just said, this is absurd, but you would, if someone has to sit at that table, you would rather it be someone responsible. And we have very much taken that position as we've advocated for the best outcome possible for our communities over the course of this. I wanted to get your opinion on what things might look like to you if this fizzles and dies. You've alluded to it a couple of times. And if the task force is not able to draw the maps, if this thing dies on the table, my concern, if coming from a district where both of our towns saw a nearly 40% increase in tax rate last year, is like, what does it look like then? So I would love both of your perspectives on what comes next if this thing doesn't move forward.
What town are you from?
I live in Hancock.
In Hancock. Yeah, I mean, Hancock's a hard one just because it's, as a non-operating district, you're subject to fluctuations based on enrollment. This is the per pupil system. That's actually a great way to talk about the funding formula that is on deck that Phil Scott pushed and got modified. It is a funding formula that reimburses on a per pupil basis. You can imagine if you're Hancock, but you're operating a school for South Royalton, if you or one of the schools I represent, if you're Stratford, and a family that's economically disadvantaged and has 3 kids moves out of town, that's a significant change in funding. And that's why they're talking about mergers. Again, they're not talking about it for any reason but that it enables the bigger districts enable the new funding formula. I wish that weren't true. That is the reality. And we did not have the votes to address that conversation. What I would do if I were you is do exactly what you're doing. Be strong advocates for your communities, strong advocates for kids. And one of the things that I've seen is opportunistic in all the best ways. What are the ways you can seize opportunities and make things happen? Because that's what you can do and you can't wait. I don't know how this will end up. I will tell you, having listened to colleagues, many people are going home to their legislative districts and hearing a very different reception from their communities than they thought they were going to get after sitting in the legislature. That alone is going to change the conversation when people get back. I was just at a public forum up in Blue Mountain last night. Senator Beck was there. He was one of the biggest advocates for the big districts. Yesterday, he was talking about SUs. Something's changed. And I think we can't afford to, someone asked me, are you going to bring my taxes down? I cannot tell you in good conscience your taxes are going down because we haven't solved the housing problem. And we're about to lose a lot of federal money. I'm just telling you, I wish I could say that that was going to happen. It's not going to happen. The way we're going to make progress is by you putting up your best brains and helping us figure this out. I appreciate your superintendent. Your superintendent has been a strong advocate for BOCES. He's been a strong advocate, not just for maintaining your current system the way it is, but what are some of the things that we can do to make it better? That's what we need to start pivoting people towards, because the way we are operating now, it is going to be very difficult to sustain until we tackle some of those issues around demographics and until we figure out how to respond to the federal losses. I wish I could tell you, if I was a good politician, I'd tell you we've got it handled, don't worry. We don't. We're trying to figure this out as we speak. And the changes at the federal level are quite significant, and they're going to have profound impacts on the state. I think we are the 12th most dependent state on federal transfers.
All right. So you have a question?
I'd like to inject this, but I realize that a lot of the other things that we have been focusing on are really going to take the precedence in trying to come up with the affordability. But I do think that at least mentioning that NAEP scores came out and they're the worst that they've been in almost 20 years. And I do think that we still need to also focus on keeping academic standards high.
So one of the things that we requested, one of the data points that we've been pushing on is trying to get at exactly that issue. I 100% agree. It's never okay to say it's okay for students to not do well. And I don't think test scores are destiny. I think they capture lots of things, some of which aren't what schools do. But I do think that we can see a softening in performance across the state that really started in around 2011. That's about when the cuts in the Great Recession, when the agency lost about 30% of its staff, would really start to show up in school districts. Again, you know, when you think every school has to provide high quality instruction and professional development, we can make that the responsibility of the school with 100 kids, we can make it the responsibility of the SU of 1,400, or we could say, hey, state, we're such a small state, why don't you do it once at the state level and then promulgate it out? That's what we used to do. When I was a principal 100 years ago, the state provided incredible support. It was very efficient, lower price point, really high quality, and it let the building leaders lead. So we need your local leaders to be the instructional leaders in the school. There are things that the state could provide support on that it stopped doing. Same with mental health. Much of that cost has shifted onto school districts. So part of it is, and the conversation that has been powerful is when people locally have helped us say, what is it that needs to be done in your community at your school, because that is where you meet people and you meet those kids and you engage them and you help them be their best selves. What is it that your supervisory union can do to help you do that work? And then what is it, frankly, that the state needs to commit to? Because we have made extensive cuts at the state level, and we can't pretend that those cuts aren't going to have an impact on you locally. So help us think that through so we can think about where help makes help, where it's helpful, and what can we do to help you so that you can do your best work at the local level. You know, the state of Vermont, we only have about 80,000 kids, right? We wouldn't even be a big district in some states. And so what are things that really can be remotely? Another thing we're talking about in some parts of the state is letting BOCES contract for buses and for food services. Different situation in our region, but in many parts of the state, there's only one bus company anymore and there's only one food service company. So your two choices are bid with a monopolist or put it in-house. That's an easier decision to kind of make if you're doing it regionally than if you're just doing it at a very local level where you may be out negotiated because you don't have any leverage. So those are the kinds of conversations that we're hearing. And, people are struggling with the pressure of cost. I don't think there's any solutions here, but I have seen communities work hard, as some of your own communities have, to try to come up with new solutions.
All right, guys, do we have any other burning questions?
Jay, you had something you wanted to interject there.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna add that when we first started this work, that one of the problems, I'll say plural, that we were facing was that we need to provide more and better resources for all Vermont students. And we need to do it for a lot less money. And so that's how we started. That was our first meeting. And Rebecca just went into greater detail on that. that really challenging problem. And I think, again, back to the conversation that your two SUs had, governance aside, if we start thinking that way, are there ways that we could make more efficient use of the resources we have? Are there things we could share, whether it's in a BOCES model, or if we end up with some sort of SU map? Is there a way that we can find some of that savings that we can then translate into better services for kids by finding those areas where we can pool our resources and our talent?
May I just quickly, so as you are moving forward drawing maps. So just to get back to that point, I would want to urge that you're doing what you're doing here tonight and listening to our conversation before, but really driving at what do folks consider to be part of their community. Because if you are, again, working in my office in Williston, people just think, South Royalton, well, you're pretty close to Woodstock, right? That's part of your community. Well, I mean, some people might consider it that, but I think your consensus, you're going to hear people from South Royalton really say, really the people in this room, that this is our community. So I think that's a really, really key, is to listen to people about what their community really is, in terms of geography, because Vermont's not the simplest place to pinpoint that, with small towns. So
absolutely.
And a few mountains.
I'm sorry.
And a few mountains in there.
Right, and exactly,
Well,
yeah.
and also the schools serve a different role. I mean, I was, one of the examples someone gave me, I stayed afterwards at Blue Mountain, had a conversation, and a lot of, we've been in a drought, right? A really bad drought. A lot of people's wells have dried up. They've actually opened up their school for people who need to take showers so they can be clean when they go to work. The school is the only real institution in town. And I understand that. And I also know that you'll see it at the table if you watch the task force conversations. That dynamic has already come out and people are having that conversation. It's also supported by a tremendous amount of research, which says that what's optimal in a rural area is not the same thing as what's optimal in Essex, Essex, the town of Essex. And so I think we have to be just really clear-eyed about that. I think we were also interpreting MAP a little bit more broadly than the legislation is. So some of the maps may not be quite what people expect in terms of big districts.
All right, one more question for you. Robin?
Thanks. Rebecca, a couple of times you mentioned statewide PD, and you mentioned wondering if you're advocating for a statewide curriculum. I remember the model. I actually was part of the model for statewide PD. We did in science, we did it in language arts, and we did it in math.
Mm-hmm.
And workshops throughout the state, and they were led by teachers.
Yep.
Brought together by Gail Hall, or there were a few.
Yep. Exactly.
Did that, and it was a good model. My fear is that this. I'm going to put my teacher hat on from when I was a teacher, is differentiation in PD. So we all, having the state say you all have to attend this PD, and half the teachers there don't need it. They're in a different level, or they're not quite there yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think there
has
to be some kind of, nothing worse than going through a workshop on differentiation that's not differentiated.
I totally agree with you. I was, and actually teachers are an incredibly tough audience. You can't put that past them. No, I totally agree with you. Again, what my faculty needed, they needed those graduate level courses in literacy so that they could be on the same page on literacy instruction. We differentiated by choosing what we took out of VisMet and what we took out of the early literacy initiative. Absolutely. And that's not curriculum. That's just practice. That's
no, I understand, but you were talking and I was wondering if you were advocating for a statewide curriculum.
No, I'm not advocating for statewide. Vermont doesn't have a statewide curriculum. There is strong, I will say the current secretary is very interested in that. And so that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, because it pays money to big companies.
I think Vermont has always had, and I think people also feel even more concerned around statewide curriculum, given some of the things that are taking place. But I think when I'm talking about, I'm giving an example, and I am focusing on professional development that builds the professional capability, connects faculty with research so that they can think about how they work with their individual kids. But I'm assuming that curriculum will be your local prerogative as it is currently, though in your SU.
SU, yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I do have something. We're all of us spending an extraordinary amount of time talking about this unknown future where we're trying to imagine the best possible outcome. We have no idea if there's going to be a map, no idea what they'll look like, no idea if they'll be accepted by the legislature. But it's our responsibility as school board members to be looking out for the best interests of our kids and our families and our communities. To that end, I would ask the two of you, please, let's consider supervisory unions where we know the people who are elected to make the decisions. Can you imagine a supervisory union here or district from exit 2 to exit 5 with 4,000 students, 25 towns, where there are some unknown number of elected officials who don't come from our town, who we don't know, who don't visit our school, probably don't even know how to spell the name of our town, okay? That is unacceptable at a time when our democracy is in absolute peril. It's just a non-starter to think about an SD option. And I realize I'm saying that with quite a bit of passion, but I think that you can look at our SU model here as a mini BOCES and see, in fact, there are efficiencies that can be gained. We'd love to look at a bigger BOCES model as well, but we're moving forward thinking about the future, not because we called for that, but because it looks like it's being forced on us. And that's our responsibility. Of the choices that are available, the supervisory union model makes the most sense to us.
Thank you, Michael. Yep. All right, thank you guys very much for coming. Thank you guys for joining us. Like I said, if you guys do as well have questions or want to pick our brain, you can email me. I mean, I've been a school board member for a long time.
President of the SU, I'll be sure to call.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys do invite us to a meeting. We're happy to join you if you want us to. But thank you for coming.
Super.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca.
And don't hesitate to reach out if you have suggestions and want to follow up. Thank you.
All right, guys, we have our whole meeting now. Okay.
There's not too much, it's mostly
Yeah,
reports.
all right. You guys love us, so you'll be quick, right? All right, superintendent.
So you have my report in hand. I tried to offer you a progress monitoring report. I would just say that you barely just received a draft of the strategic plan today in your mailboxes. It's on the agenda. Know that it's just that, a draft. The last one, I think the 5th draft is when we finally get to a place of acceptance. So know that it's a baseline, but it's certainly, if you look at the goals, which probably will be wordsmithed a great deal before November, I do think it really characterizes the work we're doing in regards to our portrait of a learner, our community schools work, and frankly, the conversation we were having tonight in regards to ensuring that the SU is a viable governance structure moving forward. And I think the tasks that we are doing in the next 3 years will really focus around those things. And so there will be a Google form coming out to you as well to start to gather feedback. We'll make some additional edits and revisions before it goes out to the greater public. And then we'll start to collect feedback like we have. We'll visit on this again in October with the hopes of possibly adopting in November. And so I wanted to mention that the rest of my report, I reviewed the goals that I had set professionally and tried to progress monitor for you where I'm at within each of those goals. And one of the things I would just add, and I put it in my report, is that we should in October look to start to pull together the superintendent evaluation committee to start to move forward in regards to the evaluation process by the end of October. those members have all been appointed by your district boards, so it'll be easy enough for us to pull that together, just like the negotiations council. The other thing I would add that I didn't put in my report, and I just wanted to update you orally, is that the negotiations council will start meeting in October in preparation for us to start negotiations with the educational support personnel, either at the end of October or first part of November. It looks like we'll be ready to kick off in November, at least to get, hopefully, thank you, ground rules in place prior to the Thanksgiving break. The other thing I just wanted to emphasize to the board, and I've said this at your district meetings, and I wanted to emphasize it again. I really believe that the leadership teamwork that we were able to place in the CBA has resulted in an increase in boosts to climate and morale in regards to us starting to effectively operate within a distributed leadership model across all the districts of the SU. We were kind of in different places around what that looked like, district to district, but being able to get that language in the CBA and really hold both sides, meaning our staff and our administration, to this commitment and pledge of we're going to work together around decision-making around how to best move forward within our buildings, I just think has resulted in a significant buy-in and boost to climate and morale. So that feels really good. The other thing I'll just mention is that the alternative programming that we're operating at what we call our Waterman campus, that's within the Supervisory Union building, is currently serving, I believe, 12 students. We really are looking to have that capped at 15 and serving students across the member districts of the SU. The profile of student that we are supporting there really is our students that we were struggling to engage in, I would say partly because of coming out of the pandemic, some of the unintended consequences around some of our protocols and procedures around what has led to chronic absenteeism. So I would say some of this is a fallout of that pandemic. So the profile of student we're looking to had just lost some sense of belonging within their home school districts, or the fit wasn't right. So I see this as just another pathway that we can provide across the SU to re-engage students in a more personalized learning experience within the Waterman campus that I believe is going to do a great deal in regards to, one, possibly addressing some students who we would have lost to homeschooling, or two, be able to make certain we're able to capture and better support students that might have been on a trajectory of dropout. And so that's the type of profile student that programming is really looking to support, because we already have some intensive social emotional programming that we've had for a long standing time. So I just want you to know, like, this is just another pathway that we've been able to provide to best support our kids, and has resulted in already bringing some kids back to the district, and or not having to place outside district placements for some of our students. And why I wanted to make certain that we get that on the record is I want you to understand that we don't get any extraordinary reimbursement from the AOE until after we spend over $66,000. So if you start to doing the math of 15 students, we are doing really well. We are not educating them nearly at $66,000 per student. Okay, so we are saving money as an SU and also as a state by building programming like that. What I would say is what the Representative Holcomb is accurate about. We ought to be doing this across the state. And I do think that we could grow these programs and do a much better job if we were working regionally to build programming like this through example like a BOCES model. And I'll entertain any questions folks may have.
I just want to echo the leadership team comment that you made. I heard positive feedback from the administrators and First Branch. They said that it was working great, and there was ownership to the decisions that were made in it. So I got really positive feedback. for my building.
Keenan was very, very strong in his positive comments.
I have a question about that, and the question goes something like this. Do we utilize a formalized way to measure morale on a year in, year out basis?
It's actually in the strategic plan that we're gonna start capturing a climate survey in.
But
You haven't had a chance to look at it.
there's a
Not
difference
currently.
between climate and employee morale.
No, but I'd love, as your HR hat, to hear more about tools we have, but we are trying to capture that within the strategic plan in regards to how to do that on an annual basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is qualitative, Jamie, the superintendent, walking through your halls.
Yeah, no, and I know, no issues with that. I just had the.
No, yeah,
question of
but no,
whether that exists.
I do think that you might have some tools that could be useful.
Okay.
Are we gonna come back?
But we did try to capture that within one of those goals, that idea.
I'll introduce you to my boss who does that for our company worldwide.
Are we gonna come back to a discussion item on strategic plan or?
That's 8.3. Yep.
On.
Okay. Also, you have my report. I won't read it to you. You all are great readers, but we're doing some great work in the first 4 weeks. We're in week 5 of school. And it's really fun to see the different English language arts classes getting off and running as we've got some new programs going on there. It's been really fun to see. Maybe just to add a little bit more anecdotes to 2 of Jamie's points there. I was with a leadership team this afternoon that was from the staff making a decision to add another, or to kind of tweak a meeting schedule that would potentially put a meeting like in the month earlier when it was going to be later. And it was all the teachers saying like, we want to do this because we want to make sure we're all on the same page before we go into this next couple of weeks. And the principal saying, gosh, it'd be great if that came from you all. So it wasn't just the principal saying, we're adding this meeting or switching this meeting schedule. And they were all, yeah, we'll send this out. It's for the climate of the school. So I think it is really sort of changing how decisions are made and the ownership of them. And then on the Waterman campus, my office, if you've had the pleasure of being there, is kind of right over what I would call like the workshop of the new Waterman campus. I hear fully what is going on down there all day long, and it couldn't make me any happier. Like there's just so much hands-on learning going on. I've watched them cook lunch outside my window. I was down there today talking to a couple of kids about the work that they were doing. They've got some design going on around pencil boxes just to keep things on tables. Anyway, it's incredibly beneficial to us to just on an everyday basis see the students in our system are benefiting from it. So a huge credit to everyone who's pulled that together. It's been it's made a really different first 5 weeks of school even in our building. So happy to answer any questions about mentoring or assessments or anything else.
Mentoring sounds like it was really successful.
Yeah, I think the shift has been, we got some really good feedback. Even we got an email a couple days ago from someone who I think was a little bit more reticent about any, I can do mentoring on my own. I don't need your help. And it was like, oh, actually, this has been really helpful. So that's a long time educator in one of our buildings. Nice when you hear that too.
Thank you, Wanda.
You're welcome.
Rebecca.
I'll stand up because I'm short. So, you have my report. Just to summarize, we were able to get all services started by the September 8th. That was the latest date that they started. So it felt like a quick turnaround getting services going, and they were all thoughtfully scheduled so that students are in their classrooms for community, for direct instruction to the greatest extent possible, and no services are being delivered by paraeducators. So they're all being delivered by professional staff. That is working really closely with our case managers, our special education service providers, and building interventionists, really teaming and working well together. I was able to join some of the scheduling meetings, and it was great to see the give and take there. Who has expertise in what and can work well with what kids. So it was great. That also then frees up the case managers as we have this role split to push in the classrooms, more classroom teachers on what does an accommodation look like, what might a differentiation strategy look like. So that's kind of a new shift now that we have full-time in-person case managers. So we're doing some work on that. One of the deeper dives will come this Friday as we work on training in the coach bundle, which was alluded to tonight. Those students with very intensive profiles, a lot of service needs, who are working way outside of what feels like an approachable standard entry point for a student. How do we give them agency and access to the general education classroom? So that training will come Friday for our case managers. And to come out of that might be some conversation about how to centralize the skill and the service, because it is a very specialized way of doing things, which we've talked about. Jamie and I've talked about what we might be able to do to, keep those students within our community and serve them well.
Thank you. Any questions for Rebecca?
Can I just say that hearing that report is incredibly heartening, considering where I saw things directly on the ground just 5 years ago. So, and that thanks extends back to your predecessor as well, but thanks to all of you who put all that in place to make that sure that that's happening, that kids are not getting pulled unnecessarily out of instructional time. And nothing against paraprofessionals where we couldn't run our buildings without them, but that we've got special educators delivering services and the case managers are in the classroom. I mean, that's all great to hear.
Yeah, and it's a great partnership. There have been a lot of trainings that Anda's offered, Michaela's offered, that both interventionists and special ed service providers, gen ed teachers, they all have access to, so we can all operate from the same place.
Yes, awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tara.
So you have my report, tells you what we're doing in the business office this month. Auditors are here. One school is done as of today. So that was exciting. Otherwise, I have benefited from the kids downstairs. I get invited down to eat the food that they cook, and it's delicious. I don't get to do that. I'm not out in the buildings as much as the other administrators are. So I loved having the kids downstairs. Other than that, I'm starting FY27 budgets with all of your administrators. Jamie and I are meeting with them over the next 2 weeks so that you'll have first drafts in October, and then our sub will be in November.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Any questions for Tara?
Don't ask me what fiscal year I'm in.
We didn't even know what year we're in.
Just October, so.
You said, is there a fuel oil
Right.
bid question we need to address?
Yes, I am later in your agenda for that.
All right.
Right. Most of my report is about Alma and new model, using Alma with the new model report cards. And I would happily answer questions either from those board members here in person or on the panel. But I'd like to highlight some things that I've heard at celebrations recently. So that would be Tunbridge World Fair. I heard the booth was a great success. We had our second newsletter come out. I hope everyone got to see that. And we are now using Alma, but we're still a customer of Web to School. So that was our former product. It turns out that it was a good idea for us to have both products this year because we are not yet done reporting 24-25 data to the AOE, having nothing to do with us. But integrations between products and their equivalents on the AOE side. And finally, I would like to say, with the future uncertain around Act 73, I would like to highlight that this SU has taken on big things in the past and is up for the challenge into the future. Tomorrow, I go to meet Robert Mayer at the former Rochester High School to put the bow on a 7-year project in transferring the high school over to the Valley Hub. So good things take time, great things happen all at once.
Well said, Ray, well said.
Michael?
Ray, would you, and you may all shoot down this idea, but I would be interested anyway if the full board wasn't, of you walking me through sort of what that Alma report card looks like, because it
Yep.
feels really interesting and very different than what I'm used to. So it might be helpful to the full board if we made up a fictional student and just did a little bit of work, just taking us through sort of the depth of that, because it looks like there's a lot there to choose from and work with.
There certainly is.
That would be interesting. That would be good.
Let me think about how we might do that for next month
Yeah, that'd be great.
or thereafter. Okay.
Thank you, Ray.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
White River Valley Policy Committee, we have met tonight right before, we talked about the, K-8, supervisory union, inter-supervisory union transfer, like that we finished up with last month about having kids have choice within the supervisory union. We, Eric made some good suggestions, about changing the name, so we've got that. We've also got some more talks going on about changing a little bit more of the language, so we will bring more back to you next month. And the policy committee would like to invite anybody with an interest on this policy. We will be talking about it next month, right before this meeting at 5 o'clock. So come to that meeting. We want to hear your feedback and how to fine tune it and how to make board members comfortable with it and where we take it. Anything else you guys want to add, policy committee? And then,
Just, so underneath 8.2, we did not hear from Vice Chair Peters in regards to her visit at Lincoln. I'm thinking the board would be curious.
oh, yes.
Hi.
Stacy,
Would you like that update?
yes.
Great. So, as you all know, Jeannie Albert from the Lincoln board visited our meeting last month. And earlier this month, on the 9th of September, I sat in on the Lincoln meeting. They're a great group, really aligned in vision. Like they are deeply in service to their community. They follow closely the changes in legislature. They're good advocates for both their tax base and the kids, and are making every effort to be as proactive as possible, which is why we've heard from them in the first place. We had a good chat. I explained to them what some of our successes and what some of our challenges have been. I heard from them very clearly that their struggle is that they are also trying to be proactive and trying to make sure that they are ready for inevitable change, while also quite happy with the hard work that they've done to get where they are now. So, for example, as a standalone supervisory district, they have a superintendent that they really love and can't imagine a future without. They have structures in place that they have worked really hard to achieve. So we'll see what happens. I get a very strong sense that if left to their own devices, they would prefer to be very much left alone to do the good work that they've continued to do. But hopefully we will hear back. And that's part of why I asked Representative Holcomb earlier, what might happen if this thing just all falls apart. And as I think some of you might have noticed, I don't think that there was an answer to that question, which I was expecting. But in part, I think it's because we all have worked to get where we want to go. And while we want to be proactive, making a bunch of big changes prematurely also doesn't seem smart. So I got the strong sense that that is where that board is sitting at the moment. And I expect we'll hear back from them after they've had a chance to process. So I was at that meeting on the 9th, and it's still a couple weeks later at this point. So I don't think that they have met since. But if you have any questions specifically, I'm happy to take them.
Anyone? Thank you for going, Stacy.
So no problem. I mean, I will say that I zoomed in because while Lincoln may be contiguous, it's very much a can't get there from here kind of situation. But it was still nice to get to know them a bit.
Which frankly is one of my concerns and continues to be one of my concerns about Lincoln, and not just Lincoln, to be clear, it's the whole redistricting, throw your dart at the board to see what happens kind of thing is the realities of our state and how as Stacy said, you can't get there from here. And, you know, how do we get Jamie over to Lincoln to figure out what's going on there? And also to Chelsea, I mean, that's just
Yeah.
You know, Eric, this raises a huge problem because I think in most people's minds, they're not imagining or working with and operating in a system where a superintendent is actually spending that kind of time. The superintendent is spending their time in the office and their subordinates who go out and report back, and there's no direct correlation between decision-making and sort of boots on the ground in the schools. And so, yeah, fear of losing that, but I don't think most people are even familiar with that model, which is one of the problems that we face in this whole discussion.
Well, it's called managing by walking around. Well, you get out of the office and you see, you hear, you consult, you communicate, you connect. And we've been doing that well. For those that are new to the SU, several years ago, there was a discussion, and I think Lincoln came to us and said, gee, we'd like to join you. And so this SU spent considerable time in board looking at the pros and the cons and what helps and how it would help us, or the cost of that, that consolidation or that merger. And I think we came up with unanimously that at that time, and looking at it at that time, that was not something that would, we would gain strength or capacity or be a better organization with that merger. So at that time, we politely said, as I recall, we just said no. These times have changed. So we're looking at it afresh anew, and we're going to see whether or not there's enough reason to change that decision. But yeah, you're spot on that.
So, and getting back to, sorry, Michael's point, we are both the beneficiaries and the victims of competent leadership.
Ironic, isn't it?
Because the rest of the world doesn't necessarily know what it looks like. We do, but then we've gotten used to it. And the notion of shifting our system to a system where we don't have competent leadership is really scary. And I mean, certainly the work of the administration is incredibly competent, but this group itself it sort of operates in a very competent fashion, and changing that mix scares the Jesus out of me.
Well, and I think spreading our superintendent thinner scares the Jesus out of me. I hear of this and that going on all the time, and I always reach out to Jamie and say, okay, I heard this today, and he already knows, or I've already dealt with that like 3 days ago, you're right, you know, like, and it's really how the conversations go. I very rarely ever surprise him with something that I hear that he doesn't already know about, and my fear is if we get bigger, that becomes an impossible task for him. And
It underscores the bigger is not better.
right.
That's right. And that also becomes less possible, Kathy, if Jamie is not present in the buildings, out in communities, and becomes the keyboard warrior that seems to be the vision of some of these exercises.
Although playing the devil's advocate to that, I would rather us decide our fate and our partners than let Montpelier do that for us. So
well, I think in terms of proactive, being proactive, I think you're absolutely right. I think if we have something in place or something to be able to say, we've explored this, we believe it's a viable option. That doesn't mean we're saying we are already doing this. You guys are all now part of the SU. We're saying we've explored this. They're on the same page. This is a very, doesn't mean we absolutely have to saddle Jamie with all that driving time here.
By the middle of December.
Right, by December, right.
Well, thank you, Stacy, but it also depends on Lincoln. And also the chemistry between the Lincoln board and our board, and Lincoln staff, superintendent, and our, you know what I'm saying, is whether it will work just because we are in sync in so many ways, and that we don't have to be saying, no, we're going to change. We're combining two strong, competent organizations that have a general similar approach to what they're doing and why they're doing it. And that's where the the contact that Stacy's doing, we continue to do it, and also at the administrative levels, is gonna be really important.
I mean, I think Lincoln is a much easier discussion than the Randolph crew. I mean, they're a supervisory district, and they have towns that are small like ours that aren't choice town. Like that's a whole different conversation, I think, to put together, and I think would be a whole lot more work to get us to be able to work together. Not that we can't, but I think,
It changes the dynamic significantly.
yeah, there's two different dynamics going on there. Where at least Lincoln is, you know, they're operating as their own supervisory unit. There's not a lot of in play.
But if you're putting
I will say,
Yeah, but
that Lincoln seemed to be very open. You know, they came to us and, you know, with open arms kind of thing, or, you know, in their investigation, that was the feeling I was getting, you know, and I think uh, their system already is working fairly well. So I think, um, yeah, so I think, you know, they were more in line with us, as you were saying.
All right, guys. Any more discussion on that?
Yeah, I would just say at some point, we will, if these maps start to gain steam, the board will need to start to make some decisions by the first of the year in regards to what we prefer. Because there's going to be a report provided from the task force, but then that report will go to Senate and House Ed. And I don't expect that these maps are not going to be mucked with. I expect they will. And I think the more due diligence we can have so that if a map starts to formalize around going to the floor, that you as a board can weigh in around what your desire is so that we can communicate that to both the House and Senate Ed committees, because you know, my sense is at some point, well, no, I mean, a map will get brought to the floor. That I believe. So we're gonna want to be able to say this is what the preferred map would be, at least for your, you know, the communities we serve. And so I think the more we can meet with folks and vet this out and get a sense, the better we'll be in regards to what you'd want to recommend as a board to both House and Senate Ed.
Santa?
Yeah, it would be helpful to get a sense of like, so if this funding formula is driving the redistricting, I'm still like unclear, and I'm maybe folk quote or captured Rebecca's response better than I did, because there were aspects of what I was asking that I feel were not adequately addressed or answered.
I agree with that a lot.
I can speak to what Rebecca.
And so I have these concerns around I guess the numbers that they're using for the basis of the funding formula, and then I like that we're somehow married to this or not at all. And so like getting some insight or clarity around that, I think would also be profoundly helpful, because it feels like it's I don't know, like snake eating its tail, where it's like we have to use a funding formula that's driving the redistricting. If anyone has better insight on that, I'd be grateful to hear it, because I was not clear.
So Sana and to the board, the weights are based off of, so the foundation formula provides a base foundation rate per student, and then there's weights factored in that then would go into in regards to the block grant each district would receive. The same thing played out in Act 127 for special education. Some districts gained more capacity, which we did, and some districts lost capacity, like CVU did. The same thing is happening within the block grant. There are some districts that tend to be higher spenders, but also wealthier districts that are going to see a drop in their revenue based to the foundation formula in regards to the introduction of the weights. Oh, by the way, also already happened during Act 127, which created this fiscal cliff crisis that the governor played into 2 years ago when budgets went down. Okay, so those weights changed then, and that's what provided the crisis then as well. Is some districts lost revenue, some districts gained. In general, our districts gained. And the foundation formula, Susanna, your district loses some revenue at the base versus what it receives now. The rest of the districts within the SU gain. The highest gaining district gains as much as 12%, White River Unified District. Okay, and you know, out of the 6 districts, the other 5, you're either between 2% increase up to 12. The concern is the legislature with the foundation formula gets to set a base increase annually. Representative Holcomb threw out 2%. That's not in the law. The legislature gets to set that annually. Okay, around what the base increase would go up per the base student. So the notion that you may have to redistrict is to redistrict maps in a way that the weights spread out for those districts that are going to lose revenue. You pair them up with districts that are going to gain revenue in order to balance the block grants out. And that's why you need larger SDs and why SUs wouldn't work in some areas. So example, Thetford District, school district, within the foundation formula, which Representative Holcomb represents, is going to lose almost 30% in revenue and weights. In order for that district to move forward, it really needs to join other districts that are gaining weights in order to balance out that revenue received. That's the issue that they're trying to figure out in regards to larger SDs. It's a redistribution of the weights.
My apologies if this comes from a place of ignorance, but like I guess how have they developed this formula from a place, like from an evidenced place, that this will resolve? Eric, I see you.
So sorry, I hear your question, and I know you haven't, but I don't think that there was any thoughtful crafting of what this formula was intended to do in terms of either how the governor approached it or what we were left with for a formula. So you will hear no satisfactory answers as to what thought process was utilized to gain or to get to that number.
Because it sounds like the funding formula was developed to force redistricting.
Well, what also is in the bill is actually, which I thought was good that we got this in the bill, is that there's 2 off ramps to this bill. There's the maps going down off ramp in January. If those maps go down, the bill's dead. There's another one 3 years from now, because what they realized is that they could produce base weights right now in an ideal world, but they're going to need to change those weights based on how the maps play out. So if you look at the bill, there's going to be a vote 3 years from now in the legislature to set the actual base amount in weights. There's going to be another whole task force formed to research that and decide on what those will be once the maps have been settled.
Sorry,
Because
if I'm wearing this face, it's like.
Well, no, because they know that they know that you can't cut a district's funding by 33%. No. And if they settle on a map that leaves Thetford as a standalone SD and an SU, they're gonna need to change those weights in order not to just gut the system.
Okay, thank you. I'm good.
So what I'm saying to you is, it's all hypothetical based on what they projected in the bill, but the weights have not been settled on yet. They said you got to get the maps first, then you got to study those districts and the students that are made up of those districts, and then you vote to set the actual weights.
So if I have a question. So we do all this draw this map, we do this redistricting work. If they get to year 3 and the weights don't work, does that mean that erases all the map work?
Well, it could if they voted it down. There is an off ramp. These new districts don't take hold, remember, until 4 years out.
Okay.
Robin's got her hand up. I'm still wearing this face.
So if the maps are adopted, they don't, but really what they're trying to say is we need to figure out the funding formula not to hurt students, right? So what they did say is we're gonna build ourselves multiple legislative sessions to figure out what the finance should be after they develop the maps. What I think is really important for the board to know is at the end of the day, this is politics at play.
Yeah.
And I truly believe this is about having less superintendents politically than it is about much else.
It's a power play. I've said that before. It's just a power thing.
It's
Concentrating more
centralization.
power and fewer people who aren't really attached or accountable to people in the neighborhoods in
Yes.
the town.
Yeah, I would agree.
Amy, has there been any movement for supervisory unions to submit their own maps?
No, and the RSCA has not chosen to submit maps because the RSCA is pretty opposed to this whole thing in general.
I'm thinking
So
maps that
didn't want to create a map necessarily that then was taken and run with. What I would say is that the task force is going to be looking at two different maps next week. One is a BOCES map, which I think is a great idea, but I would actually argue does not comply with Act 73 in the legislation. So we can say, here's a map you ought to consider, but that's not going to meet the criteria of one of the three. They're also going to look at a regional tech center map that, at least for us, is something that, might possibly be feasible because it's part of some of the folks that we've already engaged in conversations with. It'll be interesting to see if that gets any traction. Also at play with the Act 73 task force, and it was said by Dr. Bounds that you just need to know, is still this notion of choice and that SU support choice. And there's definitely membership on the task force that is very opposed to SUs because they feel like that continues to provide for choice and for public dollars going to independent schools. And so anything in regards to the SU being a governance system, structure moving forward is there's just a bias there. Like example, things said like, you can't do special ed services centralized in SU, but actually it's in statute that we're supposed to be. Like by statute, the supervisory union is to coordinate and oversee special ed. But we have a member of the task force who was on the state board when that was enacted that said that SUs can't do that. So there's just a lot of politics at play, frankly, even at the task force level. That
was actually, sorry, that was evident.
Yeah.
And in that good way.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like there's some doublethink and some weird gaslighty stuff going on where like we ask these questions and we don't actually get a straight answer. And then I know that like, we know this is a collective, but like that they didn't, it's not like a plan, or it's kind of being framed that like, oh, it's in the name of this, when from the beginning, the intentions weren't about like evolving our education system. It's about arbitrarily cutting funding because they're not addressing the things that actually need to be addressed, like industry and healthcare and housing. So they're trying to create the appearance of resolving a crisis that has been in the making for a long time without actually taking the thoughtful steps needed to detangle it. And it is messy. And so anyway, that was not a helpful statement, but I'm just trying to make sense of a thing that is not really making sense.
I would say for me, the idea that there's 3 years to a point of an off ramp, and we decided the third year that the off ramp and this whole thing falls apart, which at some point I hope the whole thing falls apart, but irregardless, it still leaves us where we are.
Right.
Where our taxes are going up to a rate that our families can't afford. So I think that we have to figure out ways to be creative within our own districts, like we already do now, to try to work on that, because I don't think the state's gonna have a solution, and I think it's gonna go off one of the off ramps and be back to square one, and they're gonna be fighting about it in the legislature again, and nobody does anything, and we're gonna have great healthcare that, saves us lots of money, like our governor promised us a few years ago.
I want to be fair for just 2 seconds to the task force and the members who were here today. We're asking questions that I don't think that they can answer because they are, unfortunately, the veneer that was put on this piece of legislation without any actual structure behind it. So I don't want to castigate the two individuals who were here who are unable to give answers because they're put in a position where they don't have any. And I didn't know using that word castigate. I don't get used to it every day.
I loved your question.
Sound like a medical term. Has got me a little worried there.
The way she talked today, it sounded like she was against it the whole time, and whatever. I have my problems with her over Act 46, so they didn't improve over this bill. All right, guys, so where are we at?
8-3.
Going off the rails. Talk about going off the rails. Strategic plan.
So you have it?
I didn't read it yet.
You probably, some of you haven't read it yet.
I just read it today.
We know there'll be lots of drafting happening. I know Michael read it. Michael, you had something you wanted to mention.
Yeah, I've already fired off a few thoughts to Jamie. The question I'm just gonna throw out there, and I'm not trying to, it's 8:30, I'm not trying to start a whole discussion because this is gonna go through a process, but at the very beginning of the document under vision, and boy, I'm gonna step on someone's toes here, so I apologize in advance. White River Valley Supervisory Union, in what, a world-class education is built on da-da-da-da-da. I find that the use of world-class to be presumptuous. And it's literally the lead piece that you read when you read this document. So I'm just gonna throw out, and puncture my tires and throw darts at me and all sorts of other things, because I'm sure somebody fought long and hard for that, because I know how these things are. I've been through vision and mission statements before. I would just argue that we look carefully at this document to see how it reads and how it invites people. And I think that if you took that out and it said, the White River Valley Supervisory Union builds strong relationships between and among students, teachers, and families and communities. It's just more straightforward. It's more invitational. So I mention it because unlike some other aspects on page 15, there's a duplication of two things. It's easy to strike one of those. You don't need to have all of us together, but if you're gonna have a conversation about a vision or mission statement, that my guess is that requires action of the full board. And so for that reason, I just throw it out there because it's a little different than my other comments. And I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm not suggesting we get into a arm wrestling match about that.
Yeah, no, I think we definitely should talk about it.
We'll look out for it.
What?
Yeah.
We'll look out for it.
We'll look out for it.
In some ways, I think if we're talking tweaking vision or mission, that's different than total rewrite, okay?
Oh, yeah.
They're very important and words matter. And so what you're talking about is very important. That's different than changing the whole thing. And if that calls for, for a side committee to really go after that and go through all that process. You're seeing it right now with when you have a tough policy where you're going through draft after draft after draft. Important, but I do think it's very possible that we could improve tweaking in a really important way to make it better without having to revisit the whole vision or mission. And
I wasn't suggesting we go through the entire.
So I think that's very constructive. I've believe, I've just scanned the first draft or second draft, whatever you have of the new strategic plan. What I didn't see, and I think one of the strengths of our plan that we just concluded, the strategic plan, was goals 4, 5, and 6. And that talked about stability and strength and financially. You can say, now we're taking that kind of for granted. When 5 years ago, we weren't. And that was extremely important, but it's still important to do. It must be done. And we've got full confidence in our team that we don't have to worry about that. And I don't have to get more gray or silver hair about it. So but I think it should be included. We had one on capital planning. We have a physical plan.
Those tasks were embedded under goal 3 to try to strengthen the SU structure. So we can certainly break the goals out as separate again, but the tasks that were under those goals, if you read the task under goal 3, embeds the finance, the board development.
I'm just one.
So it's worth the board.
I like it to have it as a highlight so that we can, it's apparent to us and we don't have to go down another paragraph, 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. I think it's for the public and for at least this board member, it's helpful to break those out as important and itemize. And the last one is enhance board effectiveness. That was goal 6. And I'm a real proponent of, if we have a mediocre board, we're going to have a mediocre organization. And so that always has to be important. We've got our goals that we set every year, almost consecutively for that 5 years. That benefited us. There's other things that we took under Kathy's leadership and your support that made a difference in this organization. So I think we need to continue to have a goal 6 on board effectiveness and talk about, okay, what sort of things that we need to continue or strike or improve on. And that deserves all our thought. You know, that we talked about retreats, we talked about goals, we talked about evaluating our performance on our goals. We need to learn from each other so that we can be effective in providing guidance going forward. So I just recommend on further consideration of adding those 3 goals.
Yeah, I would encourage the whole board to read it. You just got it. All those tasks are under goal 3, which is about us trying to strengthen ourselves in regards to being viable. If you want to break those other goals out, you could. I saw that goal number 3 being, you're not going to be viable if you don't do those other 3 goals. And so I saw it more as like less need for each individual goals, but that the idea being that you're viable because you do those offsets, and maybe those should be some of the benchmarks. But I just would encourage the board to read it and give that feedback and have a fuller discussion, because everything you said in regards to those tasks, Bill, are actually listed under goal 3. It's just whether you break it out in separate goals or not.
And I think we'll all be on the same page with you, Bill, to have a more of a discussion. I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Yeah, and as you can see, I scanned it with the bold.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, read all
And
the
I didn't
tasks.
get down to the.
They talks
so
about
I'm a bold
everything
guy,
you're
so
saying
it's,
is in the task under goal 3.
I don't see any downside to
So
continue to
everybody
show that
read
those
it. It'll
are
be on next
important.
month's agenda, right?
Oh,
So
absolutely.
hopefully everybody comes.
One of the things that's helpful for me is to be able to compare it to the last one, and I don't know where to find it, or I should.
Right on the website,
I know.
clearly, but I'll send it to her.
Well, I walk into Waterman because it's there on the entrance table. And
I forget it was on your nightstand.
I was embarrassed to ask that question, but.
All right.
Anyway, that's all I've covered. Thank you.
Here we have it on the.
So we are on
Thank
to, we're almost done, guys, on FY26 fuel bids.
So we skipped this last time we met because of our time constraints. So I had to get updated numbers. And as you may recall, the bids that we get are only good for the day that we get them. And then there can be a swing based on market conditions. So with that said, biomass pellets, we received 1 bid this year. It was from Lime Green, who is our current vendor. They went up $10 per ton. Oil, we had 2 bidders. Champlain Valley came in at $2.60 a gallon, and Dead River, who is our current provider, came in at $2.62 a gallon. So overall, we'll have savings on propane. As you remember, years past, it's been well higher than that. Propane, Irving, who is our current provider, is also the low bidder at 1.439, which will again be a savings for us. So those are the three areas of our fuel bid. For wood chips, we are already with Frolin. They are the provider for wood chips, so that's not part of our bid package at this point.
Tara, just so the board knows, what are we currently paying a gallon for oil and propane? Like last year, what was it?
Oh, I don't even have that with me tonight. Sorry. I want to say $4 and.
Jesus.
So it's quite a saving.
Yeah, it's a pretty substantial. I mean, right now, the projection on the savings for oil outside of the fact that we turned 2 buildings is over $50,000.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great.
For context, do you ballpark of how many tons of pellet do we normally? I'm just thinking in terms of $10
So
a
we
ton.
only have one district that's using pellets.
2 districts.
Oh, that's right, 2.
Sharon and Arsa,
Yeah, Arsa is pellets, not wood
and
chips.
First Branch, actually.
They're wood chips.
First Branch is not wood chips.
Bethel's.
Only White River Unified Districts. wood
Yeah,
chips.
that's right. Sorry.
I just have no idea how much.
I would have to
Even
look.
a
I
house.
don't know.
Okay, that's fine.
You're looking for the
Actually,
percentage
no, hold
change.
on. let me
Well, I'm
see
just thinking
that.
$10 seems like a big number.
That's to me, yes.
So the wood chips
If
would
it's only
be
10
an
tons,
increase of $2,500. So actually, I might have it here. Hold on. Wait a minute.
Okay,
my brain
25
doesn't
and
work.
more, okay.
Right. 2,500 with a $50,000 saving on the rest,
Yeah.
sounds like.
Right, yeah, I was just looking for that
We'll take
context
that.
because.
Yeah.
250 tons is different than if we were using 5,000. I don't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that math either.
Yeah, he doesn't have it on the breakdown of what the current usage is.
No, but I
for
think
the wood-
overall.
For the pellets.
So do you need something from us?
So yes, I just need your acceptance of lime green for the biomass pellets as they're our only vendor. And then oil, the 2 cents difference if you want to move to Champlain Valley or we stay with Dead River. And then propane to stay with Irving, but we recommend having the motion have a 5% change from the bidded amount based on what the amounts are today versus when we got the bids.
And the only question that I have about Champlain versus
Red River.
Dead River is where is Champlain actually out of? Because it seems to be somewhere up north.
I think they are, I don't get the
Like the
actual.
lakes,
for
yeah.
some reason.
Ray,
They have an office in like.
Yeah, they're one of the ones.
are you
we bought
concerned
out.
service will be as
Right,
good?
that's the question that I have is, will our service be better with Dead River as we stand currently? Or will, so that the 2 cents makes no sense, no, it's not helpful to us.
No, I don't foresee changing to Champlain Valley as a betterment. For 2 cents.
I don't think it ever hurts to, if something is, they're providing a good service, you stick with them.
Mhm.
Because in the future too, you can always
And Dead River's been our provider for many years.
come to an agreement about something that you need to change because they don't want to lose your business.
Right.
Yeah, 2 cents seems like a little bit to get the business and we'll probably be back up 4 cents next year. But
Well, right, yes, if you haven't, right, they're only, the new provider on their bid would only be 2 cents less than your current provider, and you're right, I mean, we go out to bid every year annually anyways, but yeah, I don't know if that means that we're switching back in a year, right? Like I just.
Right.
And 2 cents is going back to the pellet question, is how much of a cost it is.
So we have 27,000 gallons of propane.
That's
what we are
that's quite a
bidding
bit.
out.
So 2 cents actually makes some difference. That's math. I can't do math.
so that's what time?
5,400? Right? No. How many decimal points did I just do? I don't know.
It's only $540, guys.
500, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Champlain Valley Plumbing and Heating, is that what we're talking about? Is that the group that, because they're in Bristol and Middlebury? If that's the organization you're talking about.
Well, I think for $540.
Right.
make enough to change.
Would you like a motion?
Yes, how do you want the, can you say
So the
them?
motion would be to accept the biomass pellet bid from Lime Green and to accept the oil bid from Dead River with a 5% swing, and to accept the Irving bid for propane with a 5% swing.
So
So
moved.
moved, yeah.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
The next
Aye.
is provide the comparative that.
Any opposed? All right, so moved. Thanks, Tara.
Thank you, Sarah.
Any public comment?
Where's the couple, there was a public comment.
There was, I think they were gone.
Yeah, I don't think there's any more.
No, there's not.
All right, resignations, new hires. Executive session, do we need an executive session?
Yeah, real quick,
All right.
just with me and the board.
All right, so we need an executive session with just the superintendent and the board.
Move it with that.
Any motion for that?
Yeah,
Yes.
any motion.
So motion to go into executive session, inviting the superintendent for privilege attorney-client communication.
Second.
Turn to public session, there's no other business. Our next meeting is Tuesday, October 28th. See you all there. And yes, now we're adjourned.
Well, can I, before we do, oh, it's okay,
No,
because you skipped over.
are you ignoring me, Bill?
No.
We are that whole
I spent the time thinking about it, so I wanted to share what I thought. Under future agenda items, we've got our new strategic plan we're in the process of forming, but we don't have a future agenda item. I think we've got to make sure is to assess the strategic plan that just concluded. And I know we're waiting to get some VCAP scores, but I think it's very important. We had a very eventful, positive, and I think challenging, and we did everything right, but we should have an assessment of how we did on that 5-year plan. So I suggest that that be a future agenda item. We have 2 board things that I think we need to do. One is to assess how we did on FY25, it's just concluding. And then we need, as a board, to establish our own goals for the next year, this year that we're currently in. We talked about having a board retreat. I don't know what happened to that. So those are my suggestions that we don't forget about going forward. And I move to adjourn.
No, that was mine.